Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear viewers of Channel 2 of Saudi Arabian Television, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to a new edition of Spotlight, this program that highlights major events locally and internationally. And tonight's topic will be about railroads in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, especially with the establishment of the Saudi Railroad Company by a resolution of the Council of Ministers this last Monday. I'm very delighted to have with me in the studio tonight our guest, Dr. Abdelaziz Aluwaisheg, an economic expert. Welcome to the program, Dr. Abdelaziz.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Abdelaziz, as I said, the Council of Ministers has approved just recently the establishment of the Saudi Railroad Company, SAR, with a capital of 1 billion Saudi riyals, divided into 100 million shares, as was announced. Each share is valued at 10 riyals. Let's continue. Let's talk first about this point, the significance of this project in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the timing of this resolution by the Council of Ministers.
Well, it's actually part of a plan to upgrade the railroad service in Saudi Arabia. The 8th development plan, which came out last fall, talks about 3 major expansions. One of them is this one, is from the northern border, near the northern border, to Riyadh, passing through Hail and Qasim, with the idea that it would connect eventually with Jubail. The main focus of it is a freight service, mainly to transport phosphate and bauxite ore to Jubail. However, it's going also to have a passenger service. This is probably the longest of the 3 major expansions. The second one is Dammam, Riyadh, Jeddah, sometimes called the Great Land Bridge. And the third one is Mecca, that would connect Mecca, Jeddah, and Medina. So this, when this network of these 3 lines, in addition to the existing line, comes into fruition sometime in the future, Saudi Arabia will have a modern, fairly extensive railroad service. Obviously, is going to be limited because Saudi Arabia is such a vast country, so it has to be integrated with other modes of transportation, such as truck transport or air transport, or sea transport.
Some experts say that this project is overdue, that it should have been implemented many years ago.
Yes.
So I want to bring up this point of timing this project during our current economic boom, if you will, with the oil prices being so high. How about the timing?
I think expanding the railroad was discussed during the first economic boom, some 30 years ago.
Exactly.
And it was, at the time, it was deemed to be not feasible, not very useful for Saudi
Not
Arabia.
economically feasible?
Well, I think that was probably perhaps it was an oversight in that a mix-up between commercial viability and economic feasibility probably caused the decision. Also, Saudi Arabia then was different from today. 30 years ago, Saudi Arabia had only 7 million people, and today has more than 20 million people. The size of the economy was much smaller, so perhaps even economically it was not feasible then. And then by the mid-80s, the question became moot because the government didn't have the money anyway. The idea however, stayed alive without the means to carry it out. And if you read the latest development plan, it's rather pessimistic about completing this network because, again, the plan was developed during a time when government finances were not as good as they are today. So I think today is probably the right time, not just to talk about it, but actually to implement it.
Exactly. The company's shares, in whole or in part, according to the Council of Ministers, maybe put forward for public offering. And as you know, there's great interest in the Saudi stock market among the people of Saudi Arabia, even though we had a downfall recently.
Right.
But still, there are a lot of people interested in it. So with the 100 million shares put forward for the public offering, how successful do you think will this be? Will people be interested in investing in such a project?
Well, first of all, I mean, if the shares were offered tomorrow, probably they will have few buyers because of the condition of the market. But I'm assuming this is going to be sometime in the future, and in the long run, obviously, and even in the middle run, the Saudi stock market, I think, is going to be viable. I think there is going to be great interest in this IPO. However, I think it's important to keep in mind that railroad projects the world over are rarely commercially viable in the beginning. So I think investors is going to be in it for the long haul. They shouldn't expect immediate profits unless the government from the beginning offered some support, including, for example, the initial overhead, the right-of-way compensations, which usually represents a huge percentage of any railroad project, and also probably training of Saudi manpower and all of that. I think if the government is willing to provide all these incentives, probably it would be commercially viable in the near future. But if it is going to be on its own, probably take a while before it achieves, before it posts any profit.
In other words, it will take a long time for this company to be profitable for investors to, be interested in buying shares.
Well, theoretically, it could be profitable probably early on. However, that would be through raising prices, which would make it not as competitive as it should be, and probably not successful in the long term. But if it is going to be priced competitively from the beginning, to me, I think the government should put up some of the initial costs.
When you say competitively, you mean compared to other means of transportation,
Exactly.
like airlines and land means of transportation, like buses
and trucks. I mean,
trucks.
It's going to be a freight service. So
Exactly.
probably the main competition is the land truck transport. Yes.
Exactly. The Council of Ministers resolution also states that the establishment and implementation of the North-South Railway, like you said, the North-South Railway project, along with its facilities and services. This includes the project's direct or indirect operation, management and supervision, efficiently and according to economic operation criteria, as well as safety and performance standards.
Right.
It also includes the establishment, implementation, management, operation and supervision of railway projects, as well as the transportation of mining materials, raw materials, fuel, goods and passengers. So I see the focus here in the Council of Ministers resolution. I see the focus first on industries being beneficial from this project, like you said, the freight service, and maybe adding the passenger service later on. Is that true?
Right. I think the genesis of this project, maybe more than a decade ago, was to transport phosphate ore from the north, and then bauxites later on. So obviously the genesis was to transport mining materials. However, from the Council of Ministers resolution, is obviously this is going to be a full service company, including passenger service.
Could you be more specific as to what areas the project will carry materials from and the destination? The phosphate that you mentioned, what areas are they available in?
Well, as I said, the genesis was to carry the phosphate ore from the Jalamid mines in the north.
That's near Arar, right?
Yes, it's right near the border. And it is going to pass through Hail, Qasim, and then to Riyadh, and then link up with the eastern with the
With the industrial facilities in
Right.
Jubail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
What about the industrial facilities in Yambar? Will that also be taken into consideration, or do they have different?
Not in this line, no.
Mhm.
Not this line. I think if an extension is going to be made for Yamba, it's going to be after the Great Land Bridge is completed between Dammam and Jeddah through
Through
Riyadh, and then it would be easy to link it with Yamba from either from Medina or directly
Exactly.
from Jeddah, but it's not part of this
Right.
line.
Especially that one of the projects that you mentioned is from Jeddah to Medina,
Right.
going through Mecca, of course, as well.
Right.
So it would be easier after completing that project maybe to make a link to Yambar from that point on.
Perhaps, although that the focus of the Jeddah, Mecca, Medina lines is passenger service. in fact.
To serve pilgrims and visitors
Right.
and tourists probably as well. We'll talk about that later on, inshallah. I've done some research, and most experts say that it's really difficult to predict from now how long this project will take
Right.
and when it will exactly start.
Right.
Even the Minister of Transportation, couldn't assure,
Right.
exactly when such projects will take place. But from your experience, do you think it'll take a long time to be completed?
Well, I think the important point is to start. And this project has been discussed for a long time. And I think it's important to start. How long it's going to take, I think if you look at the development plan, the 8th development plan does not expect the completion of either the north-south line or the east-west line or the Jeddah-Mecca Medina expansion before 2009. Obviously, that was projected during the times when government revenues were quite limited. So perhaps it could be expedited, but it takes time. It takes time. I think now, if you look at the financial outlays that are projected for the whole transport sector in the 5-year development plans, it's less than 36 billion riyals, which when you think about these projects is not a whole lot. It covers both airlines, and covers ports, and covers roads, covers everything. So 36 over 5 years is not a huge sum. So obviously the financial outlays have to be either increased, or else the project may take much longer than we think. But probably nothing before 2009, 2010.
Before service could begin on the line.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it's normal for infrastructure projects to take so many years,
Right.
because if when you're building a highway or when you're building a railroad network, it takes a long time to for workers to either lay down the metal plates, or if you're building a highway to pave it in the right way. So people should be optimistic, but at the same time patient,
Right.
and let this project take its time.
Right. I think, as I said earlier, it's really an important step that a decision has been made to carry out these projects. I mean, no longer is the question, should we build them or not?
Exactly.
The question is when and how. And I think that's a major step forward. I think for a long time we were debating whether it's feasible, whether it's useful, whether it's practical, and all of that. And I think now that the decision has been made, it's a question of how to finance it, how to operate it, and when to do that. And I think the current economic boom provides exactly the right environment to start to carry it out.
Great. The existence of such a company, the Saudi Railway Company, must be a great addition to the Saudi economy at this time. How positively will this company influence the Saudi economy?
Well, first let's look at the transport sector, or more specifically the railroad service that we have. We have quite limited, in fact, railroad service. We have 2 lines, one passenger line from Dammam to Riyadh is about 450 kilometers. And then another one, a freight line, about 550 kilometers. And there is limited local service within the eastern province on these lines. So the new line is going to be over 1,600 kilometers. All of those, by the way, were 400 kilometers, 450 kilometers. So the new line is going to be over 1,600
Which
kilometers.
line exactly are you
The
referring
north-south.
to? The north-south line.
It's going to be
okay.
the longest one, probably. So it is going to quadruple the length of existing, or the length of the railroad network just by itself, before adding the other projects,
The land
bridge, the east-west, and
the Mecca Jeddah,
which is also quite substantial.
Yeah.
So I think the company is going to be a major player in the transport sector. Right now, the railroad service carries fewer than 1 million passengers a year. Carries less than 2 million tons of freight. The new company obviously is going to have much more than that, especially if you calculate the passenger miles or the passenger kilometers. So it's going to be a major player. It's going to increase the coverage of the railroad service. 100 million riyals, which is the projected capital of the company. It's probably middle of the road. It's not huge, but it's
sorry, it's 1 billion riyals.
1 billion.
100 million shares.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's 1 billion. Right.
Yeah.
It's not a huge by Saudi standards, by Saudi capital market standards, but it's substantial.
Yeah. Okay. The mining industry, like we said, is said to be a major beneficiary of such a project. We mentioned the transporting phosphate from Jalamid to Jubail. What else is there? I know that there are, mining fields and mining. There's also mining industry somewhere else in the kingdom.
Right.
Could they also benefit from this project?
I'll say obviously only the mines that are in proximity to the line, line. And the main mines that I know of is phosphate and bauxite. There might be other, I think, with extensions, or again with an integrated service with the truck service, for example. You could probably transport other things beside mines. Obviously, you could transport agricultural products from Qasim or other things.
But why is railroad service always, preferable in the mining industry to other means of transportation? Is it because of safety? Is it because of cost?
I think both. I think cost is very important. You can have huge containers on trains that carry substantial amounts, more than you can on roads, more than you can do on trucks. And you can also have service from the factory all the way to the port, or from the mine to the factory, or the mine to the port. So it provides, I think, convenience, safety, and cost. The main consideration is going to be the cost. And that's when I said earlier that you really to be commercially viable and based on other railroad services around the world, there has to be some support in the beginning at least. Otherwise, I think the company is going to either raise the fees for transporting these goods and passengers to make it not competitive, or is not going to make a profit. So I think it has to be supported from the beginning.
When you say support by the government, are we talking about subsidies, annual subsidies from the government paid to the investing company?
I think there are different ways. Probably the best kind would be to provide in-kind support. For example, as I think I mentioned earlier, the right-of-way compensation. Notice this is going to pass. It's through mostly by desert, through desert. So that's probably already owned by the government. So I think that would not represent a major problem. However, when it passes through cities, the right of way has to be compensated, and that has to be done by the government. The initial infrastructure, we're talking about a huge expanse, 1,680 kilometers for the north-south east line. That's going to cost in laying out the rails, in building the stations, in training the staff, and building facilities. I think that also something that the initial upfront expenditure is going to be huge, and for the company to recoup that is going to take a long time, unless it's provided either at a concessionary cost or for free.
How will railroad lines between major cities and ports, either on the east coast or on the west coast, how will railroad lines change the trade in the kingdom?
Obviously, transportation costs are a major consideration in the movement of goods and in trade. So obviously, if the cost is going to be reduced through these networks, you would see more reallocation of trade, meaning that there will be more efficiency in moving goods about. If there is a surplus in one area, it would be easily moved to another area. The whole system of transportation would be more efficient. The railroad service would provide also a savings in energy costs. It's true that energy costs in Saudi Arabia are low, but in fact they're subsidized. That's why they're low. The real cost of energy is quite high. So the railroad network is going to reduce that, and subsequently the cost of transport is going to be less, and that would have a major impact on movement of goods and trade in general. Passenger service, I think almost everybody must have faced the difficulty of finding reservations on Saudi coming from Jeddah to Riyadh, or especially during high season. The same thing from Riyadh to Dammam. So the possibility of having frequent railroad service, and you can have fast trains, let's say from Riyadh to Dammam in probably 2 hours or less, providing that possibility would make it easier for people to move, to whether for business or for tourism. I think Saudi Arabia especially has a special consideration, which is maybe two considerations I can think of, that would make railroad service a preferable mode of transportation. One of them is safety. As you probably know, with the wonderful highways we have, it has given license to motorists to drive way beyond the speed limit. And Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, has one of the highest road accidents in the world, and fatalities, I think, are more than 4,000 a year. So railroad service, passenger service, would provide a safer alternative. So I think families would feel much more comfortable having their children go on trains rather than risk being on the highways, whether to go to school or there are many students who move about from the east to the west, or from Jeddah to Riyadh. So I think that would be one consideration. The second consideration, as you probably know, that women in Saudi Arabia, as of now, may not drive legally. So the railroad service is going to provide a safe alternative as well, to and a legally acceptable one to move about. So